Let's get right into the Giants as they officially named Pat Shurmur their next head coach. I'm joined by Mark Malusis, Sal Licata, and our SNY NFL insider, Ralph Vacchiano. First and foremost, is Pat Shurmur the right man for this job?
Yeah, it's going to be determined based on what he does in the course of the regular season if they win in 2018. Listen, of the three finalists, he's the last man standing. So you look at what Shurmur can do. I think they wanted to go with an offensive-minded coach. I think they were emboldened by the way that Case Keenum played under the tutelage. You look at the young players that developed out in Minnesota, especially when you look at Thielen, obviously Stephon Diggs, what he was able to do at the tight end spot, certainly the skill positions, the semblance of the offense that he had, and certainly being able to consistently win and still win when he had star players go down to injury, like a Dalvin Cook, like a Sam Bradford, and that offense was still pretty good in the regular season to the point where the Vikings went 13-3. And I understand it was about the defense as well in Minnesota. I think those are all good signs about Pat Shurmur.
Yeah, and because of the work he did there, the work he did in Philadelphia, he's a very well-respected coach, a very well-respected offensive mind. Sometimes a coordinator who's a success doesn't translate to being a head coach, but I like what they did in terms of going after a guy who's had experience before. He had 2 years with the Cleveland Browns, won 9 games. That doesn't sound good, but for Cleveland, that's parade-worthy. He also has had a chance to fail and can learn from some of those mistakes. And I think that's big. That's something the Giants were looking for. They didn't want a guy who was doing this for the first time, which they just experienced under Ben McAdoo, and it turned out the job was way too big for Ben McAdoo. We at least know that won't be the case with Shurmur.
Yeah, I like the idea of getting a guy who you hope learned from his mistakes the first opportunity they got. In his case, Cleveland, obviously the odds were stacked against him with the ownership and all those different things. The problem that I have with Shurmur is that I feel like there were better candidates out there. So, maybe he's their third choice. They could say that he was the first. Who really knows? I certainly don't know where he really ranked amongst all the candidates. But as far as I'm concerned, they could have done better. They could have had a more exciting hire, and not just more exciting for name. I really believe Josh McDaniels would have been a better hire. I really believe Matt Patricia, even without the experience of a head coach before, has more upside than Pat Shurmur does. So that's where my problem is. I'm not saying he's not going to be a great head coach. I'm not saying he's going to be the right guy or not be the right guy to turn this thing around. I just feel like it's not the best move that they could have made.
McDaniels could have been a very good hire for them. McDaniels didn't want them. He wanted to go to Indianapolis. Patricia wanted to go to Detroit instead. It says something about Shurmur that he wants this job, and that's obviously important to the Giants, that they didn't have to go and woo him to bring him here. Who knows which one of these guys is going to be the better coach in the long run. The bottom line is who's going to have the better players, and you hope that the Giants are going to rebuild around whatever quarterback they choose, Eli Manning.
Well, they had to woo him to an extent. They gave him a 5-year contract, right? So Arizona was also a team that was nipping at the heels of Pat Shurmur, and they ended up going with Steve Wilks, the defensive coordinator with the Carolina Panthers. So there were other organizations, or at least one, that was interested. 5 years is a long commitment to Pat Shurmur, who had 2 years of a failed experience as a head coach with the Cleveland Browns, regardless of his 19 years of experience. But anyway you cut it, he was not their top choice. There were reports out there that Matt Patricia was the guy. He looked at Detroit being a more favorable position. Comfortability with the general manager, Stafford at quarterback. You look at Josh McDaniels, he looked at Indianapolis. Even with the concerns of the shoulder injury with Andrew Luck, he said, I'll roll the dice with Ballard and Andrew Luck as compared to the Giants and Gettleman and an older Eli Manning, even with the number 2 overall pick. So, listen, maybe the third choice is the charm. I'm not telling you that Pat Shurmur can't be a good head coach, but what I'm telling you is that I don't think he was their number 1 choice. And regardless of which, we'll see what he does, and it's all about the wins come 2018.
So Dave Gettleman said over the weekend that Eli Manning, he's going to stay. How does Shurmur and Gettleman now attack that draft?
Well, I think their plan in this offseason is to come out with Eli Manning's eventual replacement. Now, the question is that going to be Davis Webb, the guy they drafted in the 3rd round last year, a guy drafted by a previous regime, or is it going to be someone they take with the number 2 overall pick? I really do believe that the Giants look at that number 2 pick as an opportunity, and if they don't have their quarterback of the future already in place, they're going to have to jump at someone in this draft. They don't want to figure out, 5 years from now that they made a mistake and should have taken somebody right there, and they spend it being the Jets looking for a quarterback year after year after year. So the question really is, it's not about Eli Manning, it's how much do they like Davis Webb?
Yeah, and I think that's really going to be the big-time key. Do you look at any of the big quarterback prospects come late April in the NFL draft? Do they grade out better than what you already have in-house? If they do not, you don't draft a quarterback number 2 overall. If they do, then you draft Eli's successor.
Yeah, and I would be stunned if they think that Davis Webb is going to be better than the guy that they could get at number 2. I would also be stunned and think it was a foolish move if they don't try to replace what they have in Eli Manning. Eli's got to be there for now. I agree that that's a nice transition. You want him to be the starter in 2018, but you also want to draft the next guy because you know Eli is at the end of his run. They're fortunate that they had this awful season. Now it's behind them. They have a great opportunity to, have that seamless transition into hopefully the next future of the franchise.
We all look forward to hearing from Shurmur on Friday. Thank you so much, gentlemen.